Welcome back. I am John P. Today I'm going to be sharing with you 5 watches that I actually really enjoy but will never be able to wear. All of these watches have something about them that makes them not able to be worn easily for me with the type of wrist that I have, a bit of a smaller wrist size, but all of these watches are very cool and interesting. But throughout my experience at delraywatch.com, having most of these through the door, I have realized that they just don't work for me. But if you have a larger wrist size, they will likely work for you. Or perhaps you have a smaller wrist size and you're just willing to wear a much larger watch, in which case all of these watches would be really great choices for the reasons I am going to share with you. On the wrist today, I have a Rolex Oyster Perpetual 39 in the red grape. I love this. I wear this watch just so much. I always find this size to be perfect for any wrist size, the 39 millimeters. I'm really sad to see this watch be discontinued, but the interesting thing is at least I have one for myself. But the prices have been going up on these as well. So if this 39 size is the size that you really enjoy, I would recommend probably getting one sooner than later because they are just drying up. Please do not forget to check out Del Rey Watch, where we have so many different cool watches for the holiday season, for your different holiday gifts. And also make sure to check out Sinclair Straps, sinclairstraps.com, where you can find premium watch straps that are made by the same leather workers that produce the straps for some of the most prestigious watch brands, sinclairstraps.com. Also, what do we think of this Christmas tree? The last video that I did, there were some people surprisingly that had interesting comments on the Christmas tree, but I think my girlfriend did a pretty great job here putting together this tree, so make sure to show her some love in the comments below if you like the tree for this year. Thank you guys. So let's run right into it. The first watch we're going to be talking about is the Rolex Sky Dweller. Now, this is a watch that, in my opinion, is the most complicated watch that Rolex currently offers. There's also the Yachtmaster 2, which is complicated in its own way, but the Sky Dweller is going to be a 42 millimeter case size, and it also is going to be complicated for the reasons that it features the GMT, or the second time zone, as well as the annual calendar. And complications such as the calendars, the annual calendars, the perpetual calendars, these are complications that are offered by so many other watchmakers out there, but Rolex just, for whatever reason, doesn't deviate away from their main product lineup, which is the divers, the sport watches, the Datejust, those kind of more simple watches, I would say, more classic watch styles, and you get into some more calendars and the complications. Rolex just doesn't do that. So when we look at this Sky Dweller, I would love to wear it, but the 42 millimeter size and the way that the lugs pop out just don't work for my 6.5 inch wrist size. And even some people that have a 7-inch wrist size, I have heard, also just don't have a great experience with the Sky Dweller watch. And it's unfortunate because the other complicated watch that Rolex offers, the Yachtmaster 2, which is a 44 millimeter case size, has a complication of what some call a regatta timer, but a countdown timer function to the watch. So if you want a complicated Rolex outside of a chronograph, or I guess you could maybe make the stretch that a dive watch could be considered a complication with the rotating bezel, I suppose, if you wanted to make that argument. But if you wanted something a little bit more nuanced, a little more complicated, outside of the chronograph with the Daytona, you really have to go for these larger case sizes. So personally, as someone that enjoys wearing the simple, timeless classic designs of Rolex every day, unfortunately, I just won't be able to wear these watches unless they make smaller case size for these two examples. What do you think about the Rolex Sky Dweller as well as the Yachtmaster 2? I would love to see it and hear it in the comments below. Now, next we have a watch that I really do wish they made it in a smaller size. This is going to be the HMOSER Pioneer. If you watch this channel, or you watch the channel of Federico from Federico Talks Watches, you know that both of us, as well as the guys at Del Rey Watch, the guys being us and the rest of our team, we really like HMOSER. Everything's in-house. They produce everything top to bottom, completely in-house. Everything from the hairsprings to the case, everything is done in-house or a company that they own under the HMOSER roof. That's amazing. That is very rare in watches today, and with brand sharing production plans for things like between Breitling and Tudor and different joint ventures, think of Vaucher, this does happen, but not so much. And so I love HMOSER for that reason. But the thing is, they just make larger case sizes now. The Pioneer, their stainless steel model, their sportier model, it's a great watch. We've had so many of them in the door. Federico just added a Pioneer to his collection. But one of the reasons I sold my HMOSER from my personal collection is the size was just a little bit too big for what it was. They just don't make watches for a smaller wrist. Now, they do have one or two models that were built in limited production. All of their models are limited production for the most part, if we really think about it. But they do have one or two smaller case sizes out there, a 38 millimeter. But by and large, when you start talking about their more sportier models, they just don't do it. So I would love to see HMOSER come out with a smaller case size, something like a 39 or a 40. But even their 40 that they do have is a little bit larger. Think of something like the Endeavor line, right? They have a bit of a larger case size when we start getting into the 40s and then the 42. So HMOSER, I'd love them to make a smaller, more slim and tapered case size that wears for a smaller wrist. What do you think about HMOSER? Are any of you out there fans? I would love to see it and hear it in the comments below. Now this is going to be the Laureato Aston Martin collaboration that is just released and announced within, I believe, the last 30 days. But the thing is with this watch is, once again, we're talking size today. This is a 42 millimeter case size, and the Laureato in the 42 with the chronograph wears a little bit larger in the 42. Now, particularly, I really enjoyed this collaboration because I really enjoy Aston Martin. I like the brand, I like the heritage, I like what they do. I don't necessarily, I'm not a car collector by any means, but out of all the car brands that are out there, we have Jaguar, we have Aston Martin. Those are two that really I personally gravitate toward. And so pair that with a watch that overall I think is amazing, offers so much value with in-house Girard-Perregaux caliber movements and the chronograph. At the price point that you would get a Girard-Perregaux Laureato chronograph, let's say maybe $12,000 US, I think that's a no-brainer. Now, the interesting thing is, because this is limited collaboration, limited release, this watch is being posted for kind of silly numbers on the internet. So if you go to Chrono24, some of the other marketplaces, this particular watch is being listed at $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, which I think is bonkers, right? I mean, we're talking, this is not a Patek Philippe 5711. This has a very limited scope in terms of who might purchase this watch. It looks cool. It has that moto theme to it, and certainly, that British racing green and everything you would really love and enjoy from an Aston Martin, paired with some things you may love and enjoy from a Girard-Perregaux. But at that price tag, I think it probably does not make sense. But setting all of that aside, that kind of side table discussion, it's still too large for my wrist. Girard-Perregaux has kind of moved away from the 38 millimeter case size with the Laureato and the Laureato chronograph. They have some references still on their website, but we do have an authorized dealer that we work with when we gray market or we sell new watches through delraywatch.com, and it seems like maybe they're moving away from that. They haven't seen the 38 come in through the door in a while or been given the ability to purchase it. So if you are on the fence, I know there have been people in the past that have kind of taken my suggestion and picked up a Laureato, but if you are on the fence, especially with the 38 size, I would also probably do that sooner than later, because it just seems like they might be aiming to discontinue it, at least with the chronographs. That's what I can say. And lastly, this is another kind of a bummer here, because this watch I love so much. This is going to be the Patek Philippe 5524G. This is going to be the pilot's watch, Calatrava. Now, when this watch came out, a lot of purists, the Patek Philippe purists, especially when the watch came out, Patek Philippe hadn't really, we weren't talking about crazy sums in terms of their sports watches when this came out. Sure, their sports watches like the Nautilus and the Aquanaut were increasingly becoming more popular, but nothing like it is today in terms of Patek Philippe, their brand awareness, and where their pieces fetch premium prices. Still hot watches, don't get me wrong, but not where it is today, where we're talking about, unobtainium, as some people in the comments like to call it. But particularly with this watch, so many Patek Philippe purists were up in arms, is a bit of an exaggeration, but maybe disappointed, or they were scrutinizing Patek Philippe because Patek Philippe offered that traditional watch for the traditional people that wanted that classic dress watch, and maybe kind of a sports watch that was just barely sporty, not actually intending to do anything physical with it, right? I mean, we're talking Patek Philippe. And so when this watch came out, a lot of people said, it's a little too sporty, it's a little too plain, it's a little too watered down. Perhaps the power reserve is not high enough. The power reserve wouldn't last an entire weekend. And there were a lot of complaints in that category about either the movement or the dial being a little too flat, a little too matte, and something that you would maybe expect to see out of an Ernst Benz watch. You know, they have a watches that look very similar to this. I mean, it's unbelievable to compare Ernst Benz to Patek Philippe, but some collectors were, and I think it's important to mention that. But particularly, I really love and enjoy the watch. But again, we're talking a 42 millimeter case size, which I just unfortunately cannot wear. Now, out of the whole list I mentioned here today, that very well may be the watch that someday I just have to say, you know, I have to put on my big boy shoes and wear the 42 millimeter case size because I really love the watch. Maybe I'll make an exception. But with the way the Patek Philippe is going, I don't know that opportunity would present itself necessarily with this model because it has developed a cult following for the reasons I've mentioned, right? We're talking a pilot's watch, and while the Calatrava line has not been for more active events or reasons, like you wouldn't buy a Calatrava to do anything active, but a pilot perhaps might be a little bit more active, especially when we're talking about the pilot's watches that this is modeled after. And so some of you out there probably are thinking, especially if you know Patek Philippe, that they do have a smaller reference version of this watch. They have it in a rose gold. This is going to be the 7234R, and this is going to be a 37.5 millimeter case size in rose gold. So a very similar watch, or at least from the same product family. They did have it on their website for a while listed as a ladies piece. Now I think they've kind of moved away from the genders in the watches. And this might just be a watch that anyone could purchase. I know that men in the Asian market were purchasing this watch, but the 37.5 millimeters would normally work for my wrist size. I wear a lot of vintage watches for the most part, with the exception of this OP. But unfortunately, the way that the case is constructed and the way that the lugs come down, paired with the case size, just makes it just a little bit too small. And the straps also come very tapered, so you have to put a different strap on it. And so I think out of the box, it wouldn't work for me. But I know, I'll beat you to the punch. There'll be some people that would say, hey, just get the smaller case size, even though it's for a lady. But for those reasons, and the fact that it is, a rose gold, which is a little bit more flashy, a little bit more showy, than something like the white gold, it wouldn't really work for me. But for some of you out there, it may well very work. But what do you guys think? Are there any other watches that particularly you have that you would love to put in your collection or wear on your wrist, but maybe they just don't work? Maybe they're too small, maybe they're too large, or maybe there's just another reason. I would love to see it and hear it in the comments below. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P. Ciao.